Hi guys, Action 007 Cinema here. Warning, spoilers ahead. Today, I'm going to recap a Thai-American action crime movie released in 2008 called Bangkok Dangerous. This movie is a story about the guilt and sacrifice of a professional hitman that got his assignment in Bangkok. While he is doing his job there, he meets unexpected people, a friend and a lover that are going to change his life forever. What do you think will happen to the hitman in Bangkok? Will he be able to complete his assignment? Let's find out together. The story begins with the arrest of a big mafia in Prague. When the mafia is being interrogated, there is a guy dressed in black suit holding a sniper across the building, ready to shoot the mafia's head anytime. That guy's name is Joe, a professional hitman who is used to being alone and kills anyone who delivers his package because he doesn't want to leave a trace. All Joe's life, he has been taught 4 rules. First is don't ask questions because there's no such things as right or wrong. Second, don't take any interest in people outside of work because there are no such things as trust. Third, erase every trace. And fourth, know when to get out before you become a target. Therefore, Joe's next assignment is in Bangkok, and he flies there to accomplish his mission. Meanwhile, in Bangkok, there are 2 guys named Surat, the mafia, behind Joe's assignment in Bangkok, and Aaron, who is Surat's assistant. At first, Surat questions Joe's skills, but Aaron manages to convince Surat that Joe can accomplish his mission. Later, after arriving in Bangkok, Joe spends his time looking around the city, and that is when he meets Kong, a thief who pretends to sell watches to foreigners. Later that day, Joe approaches Kong, who's still eating, and asks him to do an errand for him. Kong doesn't care about Joe's offer at first, but then when Joe starts leaving, Kong accepts the offer as long as Joe pays him half of his salary first. Joe agrees and gives Kong the money and his location. The next day, Kong comes to Joe's place and Joe explains to Kong about the rules of picking a package at the Caribbean club. Joe asks Kong to meet Aum, a dancer who works at the club and also works for Aaron and Surat. Kong needs to show the money with the X symbol in it to her, and then she will give Kong the package. Kong does the instruction that Joe gives him and meets Aum. He delivers the package back to Joe's place, even though he almost gets caught by police. Kong doesn't get paid for his first job there because of the police's involvement, but that doesn't stop him from working for Joe. When Kong leaves, Joe opens the package that has a photo of someone he has to kill. After studying the face of the guy he must kill, he burns down the photo. The next day, he is running around his target's neighborhood just to know about his target and to prepare how to kill him. On the other hand, Kong meets Aum again to deliver a package from Joe to Aaron and Surat. As a result, Surat says to Aaron to give Joe what he wants. Moreover, Kong gives the package to Joe, and Kong sees a picture of an elephant's trunk inside Joe's house, and says that the elephant's trunk that is pointing down is a sign of bad luck. But Joe ignores him and closes the door. When Joe is preparing for his action, a little girl sees him holding a gun and Joe ignores her and goes to his target. When the car of his target stops because of a traffic light, Joe kills everyone in it, including his target, without hesitation. After he finishes his job, he comes back home, and suddenly the little girl who he saw earlier appears out of nowhere, which makes Joe lose focus and hurt his arms. Later, Joe goes to a pharmacy to buy medicine to heal his wound, and then he meets Fawn, a local woman who's mute and currently working at the pharmacy. Joe shows Fawn his wound and Fawn treats him gently and gives him the medicine he needs. When Joe pays for the medicine, he can't take his eyes off of Fawn. On the other hand, Kong gets into trouble on his way back to Joe's place, but he manages to run away from it and deliver the package to Joe. Even though Joe is mad because Kong is running late, Joe understands and asks Kong to take care of his bruises. Afterwards, Kong says that the guy inside Joe's briefcase is a bad guy, and Kong asks Joe to teach him everything. Instead of killing him for knowing his actual job, Joe decides to become his teacher because Joe sees himself in Kong's eyes. The next day, Joe constantly teaches Kong everything until Joe receives a photo of his second target. Joe's second target is a bad guy who buys every young country girl for his own pleasures. Later that night, Joe is preparing to kill his target. When his target goes for swimming, Joe kills him underwater at the swimming pool unnoticed and accomplishes his second mission. The next few days, Joe spends his day teaching Kong how to fight. Joe also comes back to the pharmacy to ask Fawn out for dinner with the help of Fawn's co-worker. With a smile on her face, Fawn says yes, and they have a perfect dinner full of laughter. Meanwhile, Kong is back at the club to meet Aum. Kong doesn't know at the moment that he is being watched by Errand and Surat. Surat told Errand to follow Kong, and Kong finally notices that someone is following him and decides to call Joe. Joe asks Kong to go to the ferry station, put his phone inside of the briefcase, and throw the briefcase away so that Errand can have it. Afterwards, Errand gives the briefcase to Surat and finds a cell phone inside, and when Surat picks up the ringing phone, Joe threatens him that if they keep following Kong, Joe will kill Surat's wife. Later that day, Joe drives Fawn to her home, and he is introduced to Fawn's mother. She asks about his work, and Joe says he works as a banker, and she is beyond happy that her daughter has found a good man. Suddenly, it's raining outside, and Fawn tells Joe the meaning of her name, and they start to hold each other's hand, realizing that they both have the same feeling towards each other. Afterwards, Joe receives his next target that is located in the floating market. Joe asks Kong to accompany him this time and asks him to sleep early. On the next day, they go to the location and act like a tourist while searching for his target. Unfortunately, there is a seller that is bothering them and making his target realize that he is being watched. Joe's target runs away, and after some time, Joe manages to get himself into his target's boat and kills him. Subsequently, Joe asks Kong to deliver a package, but Kong gets distracted and tells Joe that the man on TV is just like Joe, that he is helping people, and all of the Thai people love him. The next day, Joe and Fawn go to a Buddhist temple, and they pray there. On their way back home, a bunch of people attack Joe, and Joe kills them instantly with his gun. Fawn finds out about what Joe just did. Fawn can't believe what she sees. She cries and leaves Joe alone. The next couple of days is the worst day for Joe. Joe keeps thinking about Fawn, and he can't help but regret what he just did. Thus, Joe burns the picture of the elephant's trunk, and he starts to focus on his last target. Joe contacts Kong to get him his package, and is surprised to see that his last target is the good guy on TV that Kong has mentioned earlier. While having a little doubt, Joe starts to prepare a plan to kill his last target. On the other side, Surat tells Errand to erase every trace, including Kong and Aum, so that he won't get caught. Therefore, when Kong leaves Aum alone to deliver Joe's package, Errand is already waiting for Aum. After Kong arrives at Joe's place, Joe tells Kong to be at his place tomorrow to do his last job. Later, Joe opens the package and finds a sniper that can kill anyone from afar. On the contrary, Kong is trying to reach out to Aum, and suddenly a bunch of guys appear and attack Kong. Kong manages to get away with it, but Kong sees Errand holding Aum and threatens Kong that he'll kill Aum. As a result, Errand manages to erase the trace of Kong and Aum. The next day, police are already everywhere near Joe's last target. At the same time, Joe is also preparing his sniper to kill his target. When his target appears, Joe is having second thoughts about killing him because the look on people's face to his target indicates that his target is a good person. Since Joe gets lost in his mind, the police realize Joe's presence, and they catch Joe holding a sniper, thus beginning to shoot at him. Finally, Joe gets into the crowd and manages to get away from the police. When he arrives home, Surat's men come to his place to kill Joe. Fortunately, Joe has already expected this, and he blows down the house to get rid of their enemies. He sees Kong's watch in one of the men's hands, and the man tells Joe that Kong is with Surat. Without thinking too long, Joe kills him and goes to Surat's place. Before he goes to Surat's place, he stops by Fawn's house to apologize for one last time and says his goodbye. Afterwards, Joe attacks Surat's place all by himself to rescue Kong and Aum. Joe succeeds in taking care of Surat's front guards, even though he gets shot on his shoulder, and finally releases Kong and Aum. On the other hand, Surat and his other guards try to escape, but Joe manages to kill all his guards until the only one that lives is Surat. At the end of the story, the police come to Surat's place. Joe has nowhere else to go, so he gets inside Surat's car. He feels like he has already died when Fawn found out about his actual job and left him alone. He is filled with regret, so he thinks that he has nothing else to live. Therefore, he decides to shoot himself and Surratt in the head. And Joe's wealth is given to Kong, who is considered as his only family and student. Even a person who is doing a bad job, such as being a killer, that has been taught to not take any interest in people outside work, can fall in love and make friends if he finds the right person. Yet a person that has been taught that there's no such thing as right or wrong, at the end of the day chooses to do the right thing. We are all human after all. Deep down, we want to do good things to the people we love, and we protect them at all costs. Anyway, what would you do if you were in Joe's position? Do you think Joe deserves a better ending? Let us know what you think in the comment below. Thank you for watching, and as always, see you next time.